safe from wherever you're watching us. I hope you're all safe and sound. This web series is held in partnership with Jack Ma's Foundation and ANPI, or African Entrepreneur Prize. As you've seen in the video, ANPI is a pitch competition in Africa that aims to support African entrepreneurs and spread the concept of entrepreneurship all across Africa. Our topic for today is scaling. We'll be discussing how to scale, how to choose the right market that you're scaling into, how to create new revenue streams, and some other key points that are very critical and very important to any startup that's willing to scale in the future. We have a very special guest straight from Dubai today. We have Janardan Dalmia, CEO of Trukkin. Trukkin is a logistics cloud-based B2B startup that connects shippers and aggregators together with their platform. Before Janardan was the CEO of Trukkin, he has 10 years of investment banking experience in Barclays and Bank of America as well. So, hi, Jan.
Thank you, Mahmoud. Appreciate it. Hope everyone's doing well, keeping safe during these tough times.
Sure. We're very excited to hear you. I'm going to leave you right now with the mic, and I'll come back after you're done with the presentation to moderate some Q&A.
Thank you. Let me try and screen share.
Okay.
Can you guys see my screen?
I can see it, yeah.
Okay. So, are we waiting for anyone else, Mahmoud, or we can begin?
Sorry?
Can we begin now?
Yeah, sure.
All right. Thanks, first of all, everyone who have tuned in for this session. Thank you, RiseUp and African Entrepreneur Prize on having me for today's session. ANPI is one of the major programs of Jack Ma's foundations in Africa that aims to support entrepreneurs across the continent to develop their business ideas and inspire others to pursue entrepreneurship. I encourage everyone who is on the call to apply for this competition. This will provide you with a lot of learning and networking opportunities and also a lot of exposure for you personally and for your brand. So please interact, submit your questions, and I will try to get to all of them on this webinar. And during the presentation, while I'll be focused on talking, if you have any questions, we'll try to answer them live or we can answer them during the Q&A segment. Okay, so before we begin the session, just to understand my audience, can I get a raise of hand for people who are interested in scaling their business? There is a hand button on the right side. You can just click on that and I can have a look at that. Got it. So pretty much everyone is interested in scaling. The second question, if you can please raise your hand on, is how many of you have already scaled your business? So it will help me understand whether you guys are still operating in one geography or have had an opportunity to scale. If you could please raise your hands. Okay, so very few. Great, this helps me understand the audience. And again, appreciate you guys coming online and hopefully I'll be able to provide you with some inputs which would be helpful while assessing whether to scale or not to scale. Let me begin by discussing what is scaling. Founders often find themselves wondering when is the right time to scale their startups and how to go about launching their journey to multiply growth. But let's first define what is scaling. Scalability is a characteristic that describes the capability of a business to perform well under an expanded workload. What I mean is, scaling a business is not the same as growing a business. Many people use these words to mean the same thing. A company getting bigger, taking up more market share, and making more money. Scaling has different meanings to different audience. Some companies, due to the nature of their activity, may need scaling. As a part of their business model, they need a scale to survive. A great example is if you think about for telecom companies who own towers, they need to have towers across the region to be able to provide their service continuously, right? I mean, no one will use a telecom service provider if you only had a tower in one area and you go to the other area and there is no network there, right? So this becomes pretty much scale to survive. This is their offering. And a lot of times, such companies have low margin and high volume business. So they need scale. They need economies of scale as a necessity for them. And some companies need it as an ability to sustain their business growth. For example, you have created an amazing restaurant concept and you have maxed its capacity and now looking to open more to grow your business. So you could either look to open more restaurants as a part of your organic growth strategy, or if you want to grow exponentially, one will look into the franchising model. So you don't go from 1 to 3 restaurants, but rather from 3 to 12 restaurants. So exponential growth without hurting your margins is what typically scaling means, or in some cases, hyper growth at the cost of margins temporarily. Let's look at what is the difference between business growth versus business scaling. So what is growth in the business? When companies grow, they are increasing their revenues equally as fast as they are adding resources to enable that increase. For example, the company may gain $50,000 in new revenue, but in order to do so, they had to hire a new sales rep with a $50,000 salary. The company's gains and losses are evened out. So even though the company is growing by 1 employee and a corresponding uptick in the revenue, it really hasn't gained much value. When you look at scaling, on the other hand, they add revenue at a faster rate than they take on the costs. A company that is scaling may gain $50,000 in new revenue, for which they probably only spend $5,000 on marketing or increasing their operations slightly to allow more efficient marketing to a wider audience. The company's gains outpaces its losses, allowing it not only to grow, but able to scale. So scaling your business means you are able to handle an increase in sales, work, or output in a cost-effective and reasonable manner. Although it is not exactly the same as growing the business, but the outcome brings both business growth and the profitability. Again, guys, if my pace of talking is fast, please feel free to flag that and I will go slow. And if you have any questions in between, please raise it and the moderator will help ask me. And I will try to answer as we go along. Now that we have answered what is scaling, the next question to tackle is when to scale. Every entrepreneur wants to scale his business as soon as possible. It is our dream to grow the business faster than anything else. But as much as we want to scale, there are various factors that we should consider before stepping on that accelerator. Scaling in business mainly depends on 2 factors. One is capability and one is capacity. Ask yourself, is your business capable enough to grow? Does it have the capacity to accommodate growth? As you launch your business, you should already be thinking about a strategy for scaling your startup, not just growing. If you simply continue trying to increase your revenue by adding more resources with a corresponding increase in costs, your growth is likely to stagnate. You will get to a point where you realize the effort to grow simply isn't worth the financial gain. Then the next question one should ask about is your business model really scalable? For example, scalability of a software as a service company, SaaS companies, which we call, is different than for a professional-based services company. While all companies can potentially be good at growing, Some companies are better positioned to scale than the others. Professional companies, professional services companies, for example, have challenge with scaling their business because they need to add more human capital or new personnel to do the work for each new client they service. A great example are when you look into legal services company. So if they want to provide additional service to additional clients, they need to hire more lawyers. Medical services company, if you want to treat more patients, you need to hire more doctors. Whereas if you look at software companies, they are very natural at scaling since they are able to sell their product to more customers with very minimal added cost. And as all founders and entrepreneurs here, you would all relate that this ties up to the customer acquisition cost, which is a very, very important metric almost all the investors follow when assessing your business model while considering investment. Let me also talk a concept about blitz scaling. Not sure how many of you have heard it, but I'm sure a lot of you must have heard about it. It is about bringing speed to your organization. If you would have read, there's a book on blitzscaling by Reid Hoffman, who is the co-founder of LinkedIn. Blitzscaling is the prioritization of speed over efficiency in an environment of uncertainty. So blitzscaling is a way to grow your startup quickly and it involves taking very big risks. For example, think of Uber. By scaling fast, they became not only the dominant car sharing app, but along the way, they have improved their services. But above all else, they prioritize speed. So for them, speed was the most important thing. While you were servicing, while they were growing, entering into various geographies, they were facing a lot of issues. So they were tackling those issues while growing. It's called hyper growth. So they followed the concept of blitz scaling. But for such a task, also requires a large capital injection or other means of financing for this exponential growth. So one needs to look at their own business model and resources they have at their hand along the way, where they are on their own growth cycle before they consider scaling. But generally, when you have sufficient capital, you have the management bandwidth and capacity, and you are confident that you can expand into new geographies without disrupting your existing setup, is a good time to consider scaling. Now that we have spoken about when to scale, let's talk about steps to scaling a business. Just looking at a Q&A, and there was a question on when to scale. So I hope this answers that question. But let's tackle about now steps to scaling a business. So now that we have discussed what is scaling and when to think about scaling, let's follow the steps to scaling a business. Number one is your commitment to grow, to get committed. Many early stage ventures lack the will and the ambition to scale. This is fine, of course, for many entrepreneurs. Building a business is to support, certain lifestyle, but for some very ambitious entrepreneurs, they need to create realistic growth targets and develop plans and concrete actions on how they're going to achieve that. By commitment, what I mean is, for example, if you look at a mom and pop cafe, right, which is down the street from where you live, and they sell great coffee, they sell tea, they sell whatever, but their ambition is not really to kind of create an empire and have a scaled business. So that fulfills their criteria of the entrepreneur of a certain lifestyle or their own ambition. Versus when you look at Starbucks, which went for a massive scale, they were selling the same coffee, but they were selling at a massive scale. So the commitment to grow is a very, very important step. And it's step number one. Step number two, I would say, is building broad management skill set. It takes more than a founder to build a successful business. As a founder, you are very passionate about the business, but to scale, one needs to build a team with broad and complementary skills. You need strong believers and supporters in your business, your ideas, your cause. You need very smart set of people in every field, from whether it's business development, whether it's operations, it's product development, whether it's finance functions, and other experienced executives who would provide valuable contribution in the business and also provide useful mentorship for scaling. You need to associate yourself with quality people and surround yourself with a very talented bunch of people who will bring in new ideas, challenge your ideas. They will bring in new products and give them a free hand and remove the fear of failure, so that you don't slow them down and let them perform their true potential. Step three, the first is commitment to grow. Then we think about broad management skill set, and then start building collaborations. The growth mindset needs to extend to partnerships with people, with organizations outside the business. Entrepreneurs should build a network of partners, such as service providers, sales channel partners, suppliers, their customers, who may, for example, be willing to help with either market information or provide you a market entry. So many of these engagements could take the form of formal alliance between the entrepreneurial firms and the established companies. The next step is start establishing standardized processes. This is really, really important as you think about scaling the business. It can be very hard to admit, but managing the operation by hands-on involvement of a founder will eventually limit growth. If a startup is going to scale, managers need to implement standardized and repeatable processes with proper delegation of authority. You will need to develop and invest in your technology, train your people accordingly. It sounds very simple, but it's not an easy task. Many a times, the resistance is from within the organization. You will need to push your team, make sure this is implemented, as this will be a key to help scale the business without negatively affecting your current business. The business has to become more process-oriented than people-oriented in your organization. The next, I would say, is identifying your core competence. I would say knowing your strengths and weaknesses are very important. You will need to address your weakness in business and find ways to fix them by way of either hiring the right talent, upgrading your own management skill set, or collaborating and partnering with right alliances. Without knowing your core competence, it's difficult to create strategies. Many startups have evolved by doing certain things without articulating their core competence. So entrepreneurs need to identify and emphasize a company's core competency, the uniqueness that allows it to compete in order to invest in a focused growth. And then articulating your competitive strength. Many entrepreneurs fail to look at their business through the eyes of their customers. And some founders build a distorted self-perception based on their own belief of their product or service offering. You start believing that whatever you are building is what the customer wants. But many a times, so people want to test scaling into a new geography with a MVP, with a minimal viable product, because a lot of times as you go in, you will have to understand the market, you will have to maybe pivot your product and services slightly. And so you have to be very open to understanding what your customer wants. So knowing your competitive strength and articulating it is very important to allow you to scale on those strengths. And lastly, I would say one of the very important things as you think about scaling is building the right culture. Naturally, as you start operating and over the course of its journey, every organization develops certain values, some culture which is inherent amongst its people. It's defined by how you treat your customers, your vendors, your employees. And as one looks to scale, one has to step away from their comfort zones to help build the business. It is important that the scaling of the business feels like a natural extension of the business, and people across the organization relate with each other as one team rather than start operating under individual silos. The company will have to be open-minded in adapting um, new culture, but would need to ensure that the culture of positive mindset is not replaced with a negative one and is not overlooked to capture an artificial growth in that moment, because this will not be sustainable in the long run and will cause more headache and ability to manage. I see many startups or many companies who have had, a good success with raising capital, good success with increasing the business or scaling to a certain extent, but have horrible culture. And when you fast forward and look back, many of those companies have miserably failed. So culture is, I would say, it's more often than not, it's very overlooked criteria, but I would certainly emphasize that you fix the organizational culture from the very beginning, and it should be something which is non-negotiable. Now that we have discussed about steps to scaling a business, let me talk about creating, think about how we have creating new revenue streams for the business. Thinking about new revenue streams is also very important as one thinks about scaling. This is about diversification and ensuring you don't want to leave any low-hanging fruits on the table. With your existing setup, if you can create new revenue streams in the business, this is an added benefit. We are not talking about taking the eye off the main thing which you are doing, but rather working smartly to ensure you can develop new ancillary or complementary businesses which can bring you additional revenues. And during the crisis, this helps run the business. If I were to think of a very relevant example in today's crisis, it is the restaurant food delivery business. If you think about back in the day, a lot of restaurants till before the delivery concept became popular, a lot of these restaurants were focused either on in-dining, people who would just come and dine in the restaurant, and there were certain companies who would focus on the delivery. And so the whole idea was dining in the restaurant, cater to a great customer experience, etc. But now think about what's happening to them today. Because of the crisis, almost all the restaurants are shut or pretty much have zero capacity. People are not going in, and most of them are today purely surviving based on the home deliveries, trying to recover whatever operational costs they can from a secondary revenue stream. Similarly, another example is gym. A lot of these fitness clubs and gyms are all closed. They are finding new ways to survive by renting out their gym equipment so they can at least recover or recoup a part of their operating cost. So these are having ancillary or diversified revenue streams can, when they can become very helpful for your business, you don't know, but certainly in times of crisis it comes very handy, and it shows diversification of risk. Of course, some businesses are now compelled to find revenue streams, but the bottom line is that having various revenue streams might help a business during times of crisis. again, because of risk diversification, and it also helps in certain cases increase customer stickiness. A great example in terms of increasing customer stickiness are the telecom and cable companies. Again, back in the day, you were provided with individual, you had a different service provider for your landline. You used to take internet from somebody, you used to take cable from somebody, you used to take mobile phone from somebody. But today, most of them are packaged and provided by a single service provider. And what that does, it helps increase customer stickiness and it reduces the customer churn. So even if you as a customer are unhappy with, let's say, one of their products, it's just very hard to switch the service provider because you are so deeply embedded with the business, and it's not easy to switch. So find ways how you can cross-sell more to your customers, and how more you can increase stickiness with your customer base, because these will all become very handy as you would scale your business further out, and also during the times of crisis. So creating new revenue streams and thinking about various ways to do it without losing focus on your primary business is always a good option as you start thinking about scaling your business. So now that we have discussed this thing, let's discuss about expansion during the recession. So we have already discussed about what is scaling, when to scale, step to scale, creating different revenue streams. Let's talk about expansion during the current time, which is very relevant, I guess, for all of us. Look, this is very, very timely topic, obviously. I think it is very clear to everyone that times like these, it will be very hard for some companies to survive versus some companies would be able to expand, and some companies are lucky to even operate in a field which is very high demand today, and it's much easier for them to grow and expand. Sorry. As they say, every recession creates various opportunities. If you look at the crisis of 2008, 2009, both Airbnb and Uber were born during the last financial crisis. I'm pretty sure that even during this crisis, there'll be new unicorns who are getting incorporated now, and they will be born around this time. So important is to really understand whether your current business model, purpose, etc., is still relevant post-crisis. This requires honest assessment of our own business models. If the answer is yes, then it is more about sustaining through the crisis and be ready to expand as soon as you get an opportunity. But if you truly assess and find that the answer that your business needs to change, then you need to figure out a way to repurpose your business for post the crisis. Almost all the investors are reviewing their portfolio at the moment and checking which companies they want to support or which companies are worth shutting down. It's almost like choosing and deciding in times of crisis which companies they want to provide ventilators by means of providing emergency funding, or which companies they believe are not going to sustain and worth shutting it down. So very, very important. Crisis will filter out weak business models, and unfortunately it's a very, very tough period. How an entrepreneur and his company adapts today by showing the flexibility in adapting the current environment will go a long way. If the company has found its purpose and or repurposed its business model, which would be relevant during the recession and or post-recession, then yes, absolutely, it is a great time to expand. Starting or expanding the business during the recession is, if one is able to, I believe, has a lot of benefits. Firstly, the costs are very controlled and you are really navigating in the rough seas. And, as the saying is, smooth seas never made skilled sailors. So, when you start in such a difficult period of time, you are always on your toes. You are, very cost conscious. You are, trying to build your business in a very low margin environment, extremely competition where people are trying to just kind of survive. So this really helps put very strong foundations for a startup who're looking to start or expand during this time. So if one can expand and navigate during these uncertain times, repurposing their business, then I think they will be there for a very, very long haul. Now that we have spoken about expansion during recession, let's talk about choosing the right market. I would focus on a 4-step framework to help you choose the right next market where you want to grow. Obviously, you have done a good job in your current market. You are established. You are confident about your business model. You have figured out, this model is scalable. So the next obvious question is that where do I expand this to? So before you think about the international strategy, you need to work out on how to define your options. Does it make more sense to define your expansion by cities or by countries, by languages, by ecosystems, or something else? The answer lies, on the fact like what kind of business you are running. Maybe a geography with similar cultural fit is a natural extension. How easy for you to manage it? So first is to define the options and then prioritize the markets. While prioritizing the markets, you will need to ask various questions. Is the new market big enough to really matter, right? And I think this is very, very important in the context of Africa. So Africa is made up of so many countries, right? But which are the countries where there is really maybe consumer power? Maybe it's Egypt, maybe it's Nigeria, maybe it's not worth first focusing into a country with a smaller population, but rather focusing on a country with a bigger population. That's why most of these startups and companies want to be either in Egypt or Nigeria or Morocco, because you get population there, right? So very important to prioritize which market you want to enter. How is the market? Is it big enough? Where to focus first? The second question you should ask about is, are there synergies across your current market and the market which you're trying to enter? How well will your product work in this market? Can you beat the competition, or do you have a competitive edge? Beating the competition is something which makes a lot of founders and startups nervous sometimes, because they think there are other competitors already in the space and they have entered. There is both sides of the coin. One, that yes, having competition, that means you have to work more harder. You have to have a bigger edge with your product or service offering. But at the same time, I wouldn't say that someone should get really worried about competition alone. But rather than thinking about competition, one should think about their customers, right? Because if you keep your customers happy and if you're developing products and servicing the customer, you can always, fight with the competition. The next question to ask is, will the economics work? Maybe certain economics which work for you, which makes your margins work in your current market, will it be the same in the different market, or will it require certain adjustments? Do you have enough funding to make meaningful progress there? Do you have an existing partner or a key customer who can help you get started in that market, with a minimal cost? And lastly, understand what are the legal aspects and requirements of expansion into the new geography. So there are various questions which one needs to answer. Your ability to manage, I think, is a very, very important question to be answered, along with, do you have the funding, you have the capacity, you have the ability? Are you allocating your resources to a market which is big enough, or you are allocating the resources to a smaller market? So all these things, when you answer, you start kind of refining and filtering down and, getting down to the choosing the right market. So expanding into the new market takes time. Most of the time, there is a difference in reality of how, we expect a business is going to go versus, what really happens. And I'm pretty sure most of you must have experienced the same. So maybe, start small so that you don't stretch yourself too thin in terms of available resources. Let's discuss, now that we have discussed about, lots of points, I think given the time, let's talk about, summarizing what we have discussed. So scaling up is a significant and organizational wide transformational process. This requires involvement. Sorry. Yeah. This requires involvement of all stakeholders, both internal and external, and attention to details. Resources and adoption requires continuous steering, continuous navigating, not just following up on a plan that was written long back and probably endorsed by a group of people. So you as a founder, you need to ask yourself again, are you committed to scaling? Because it takes a lot of toll and effort to do that. And if you are, then you can proceed. Scaling up requires a collaborative leadership team that has committed staff who can work together and can handle issues that pop up at various stages. Businesses that scale up come in all shapes and sizes. You could be a small company scaling up, and you could be a very large company scaling up. But the most successful ones are those that can articulate a purpose and a vision across all levels of their organization. It is important to understand the difference between growth and scaling clearly. And once you have clarified what is scaling for you, then to think about when to scale. Also choose between what kind of scaling are you going to go after. Is it going to be an efficient scaling? Is it going to be fast scaling? Or is it going to be a blitz scaling? Again, to summarize, efficient scaling is when your priority is on efficiency and your assumption is certainty, right? So you are already doing something. You want to make sure you are efficient at doing something, and then you make certain assumptions about a certain market and you enter that and you operate efficiently. That's called efficient scaling. Fast scaling is when your priority is speed, but your assumption is still certainty, right? So you don't care so much about efficiency. Your focus is towards speed. I want to get there first. I want to get there fast. But you know what you're going after. Or, the other concept is blitz scaling, which is a very dangerous one, although very popular with some of the amazing companies which have been built, is where you prioritize speed over efficiency. And there's a lot of uncertainty. It is do or die approach, right? So this requires a lot of funding. It's a high risk, high reward. And mostly blitz scaling is for companies where they see there is a huge prize, there is a huge pot of prize, and they want to get there very fast, or because there are a lot of competition, there's a lot of competition in that space, and they have a lot of funding. So they pretty much, the idea is like Uber or Airbnb, etc., who want to blitz scale, basically grow and fix things as they grow. So ask yourself, is your business capable enough to grow? Does it have the capacity to accommodate growth? Do you have sufficient capital? Do you have the management bandwidth and capacity? And are you confident that you can expand into new geographies without disrupting your existing setup? If the answer is yes, then you are ready to scale. And once you have the when answered, then the steps to scale requires reiterate your commitment, build broad management skill set, start with building collaborations, start with putting standardized processes in your business, identify your core competence, articulate your competitive strength, start, hiring the talent and fixing where the gaps are, and focus on building the right culture of the organization. And as we discussed earlier, think not only about expanding with your primary product, but also think about creating additional revenue streams. Your primary offering might be the main business in your current uh, market, but maybe one of your other products or services might have more potential in the other market. So this will also give investors confidence on your diversification and your business potential. As we discussed, recession is a great time to build the businesses, if the purpose of your business is still relevant. Otherwise, you will need to take a step back and have an honest assessment of your business model and repurpose it fast for post-crisis world. Remember, investors really value smart teams and businesses who adapt fast and show flexibility and agility to adapt. Ability to pivot is a very valuable characteristic. There's a saying in startups, if you have to fail, fail fast, right? So that you don't continue to burn resources for a long time. And ability to pivot is going to be a true asset for a lot of companies and teams, especially, coming out of this crisis. Once you have all this figured out, then also choosing the right market to scale to, which is about defining your options, prioritizing markets based on size, reach, competitive edge, cultural fit, funding, and legal aspects. And at the end, I would like to conclude by a common saying that is, starting a company is like jumping off a cliff and assembling a plane on the way down. So as founders, you guys have all probably relate with it. You could put a lot of plans together, but when you actually start executing, you will have to adapt, be flexible, and show that agility and frame of mind where you are mentally tough. Your ability to spot the trend and be flexible and adapt. So that was from my side. I believe, Mahmood, I think we are on time, and I would again encourage all the participants on the session to apply for the ANPI competition, and I'm happy to answer any Q&A where I can.
Thank you so much, JD, for that presentation. Super neat, very organized, very well structured, and very insightful. Thank you so much. We have a couple of questions that we have to answer right now. So let's begin right away. There was a question asked early enough. What tools can we use in evaluating progress?
So look, I think progress in terms of scaling, as we touched, when we think about scaling, the first and foremost is about, you want to expand without disrupting your current business, right? So if you're able to enter a new geography and able to start, making a mark in that geography without disrupting your current business, I think that's already a good milestone that you have reached, right? So otherwise, you're going to jeopardize what you already have in hand. And I think that probably is one good tool. I think another milestone would be when we talk about tools in evaluating the progress is how can you run that business on a remote control, right? Because as a founder, you cannot be in all the places at the same time, right? So if you're able to manage the business without actually being there, I think you have made a significant progress already.
Okay. Here comes another question. 1 second. Is it better to have centralized or a decentralized management? Or in other words, which function should be centralized and what functions shouldn't be centralized? The question is from a digital marketing startup.
Look, I think the question about centralized and decentralized management, it totally depends from organization to organization. I totally believe in decentralizing it because, it doesn't make sense as, a very common saying, you don't want to hire smart people and always, tell them exactly what to do, right? So as a founder, and we touched on this point, as a founder, it's impossible for you to do everything by yourself, right? Um, and this is, and I truly believe in that we want to hire the best people who are in the business and provide them with the resources they need to be able to, I mean, you have hired them for a reason, right? It's not because you liked them, they were your Facebook friend and you hired them. So you obviously interviewed them, you saw some potential in them, and then you hired. So give them that flexibility to perform, to show their true potential. So I believe in decentralization because the more you can do decentralization, that means you have more free time to scale your organization, right? Otherwise, you would always be tied up with day-to-day operations and unable to take it forward.
Yeah, exactly. It's a huge barrier to growth and scaling in general. Having everything and every decision centralized to a specific person is definitely a hindering for growth. Okay. Can you talk about the ways Trukkin scaled throughout the years? I believe you guys are in 8 countries or more than 8 countries right now.
So we have 5 offices across 2 countries, but we service almost 10 countries. And, I mean, I followed the same steps, right? So first we started, for us, both are our home markets. I don't go to a market and think that we have scaled into a market which is in addition to what we have, right? I consider every market where we go as our own home markets, because what that does is it allows the whole team and, the whole organization to associate with that market as if, that's their own market. It's not just
I
some
think local, we can say.
additional. Exactly.
Yeah.
So, again, having the right set of people, putting the right set of processes in place, connectivity. I truly believe in uh, making our organization feel everyone as one culture, one team.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it's very easy for people who are out in your outpost, right? Who you call, are in the trenches, to start feeling disassociated with yourself, right? Because they
Yeah.
start feeling, oh, it's them versus me, and
Exactly.
that's where the problem starts happening. So, having regular communication, making them feel, and this is a lot on the leadership, right? I think this is really where the founders and the CEO need to play their role to make sure that nobody in the organization, at whichever level they are, right, feel that they're disconnected. They should, if you can make the person who is at your outpost that he's still valuable to you and you care about him, right? And you know what he's doing when he's working hard or when he's slacking off. You have a proper management. And those are the things which we followed, which has helped track and scale over the years.
Yeah. Okay, we have some questions. Mira Ali is asking, is it good to invest in logistics industry?
Can you repeat that?
Is it good to invest in logistics industry?
Absolutely. I'll be pretty biased about it. I think, I mean, generally, look, instead of, thinking about whether it's trucking or not, how do we assess why do we need to invest in logistics industry? If you just look about, logistics, which is a combination of land freight, air freight, sea freight, customs clearance, warehousing. And if you look at the market size just between the GCC region, it's almost $45 billion, market.
Yeah.
If you look at including North Africa, so which is, GCC plus North Africa, which is called MENA, it's a $65 billion market, right? And if you think about the big players in the industry, such as Aramexes of the world or DHL or FedEx or UPS, right? It's impossible to think that one company can control the whole logistics market, right? Which
Yeah.
means there is a significant opportunity to improve and penetrate in the segment, right? And when we did our own research on the industry, and we saw that a lot of companies in the same sector are operating in the old school traditional manner. There's a lot of scope of digitization, improvement, service levels, right, and creating. Basically, we, we saw a lot of opportunity where we can professionalize and institutionalize a very highly fragmented business. And so, for us, I think logistics is a very important sector. And this is becoming more and more, this point is getting reiterated during this crisis. Even when the passenger movement have pretty much come to zero during this crisis, complete movement was stopped. the goods needed to be moved because, this is what kept supermarkets stocked, right? This is what kept factories running to a certain scale because essential items had to be moved. So commercial logistics is extremely important and it's going to grow.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Okay. I believe Mir is building on the question.
Okay.
What will be the impact on logistics after COVID-19, and will it jump back, or it will take time to recover post crisis?
Look, I think if we assume that something, first of all, completely stops, because commercial logistics has not completely stopped during COVID-19. If it completely stops for 2 weeks, 3 weeks, it cannot be longer than that. The
Yeah.
sudden jump in demand will be very high because, the factories will be roaring to produce again. There are many factories who have a lot of inventory, which has been, kind of lying there and they want to supply. So there will be a certain spike in the demand. But given the fact that a lot of big companies would be facing some kind of a slowdown, there will be a bit of a slowdown for the effect of which will be faced by very large matured logistic companies, not companies like us, because we are still in the high growth phase. Hello, Mahmood? Hello. Hey guys, can you hear me? I believe Mahmood is rejoining. He has some internet issue, he mentioned. Guys, can you hear me? I can't hear if you guys want to talk. I don't know how to activate this. I believe Mahmood is having certain issues with his internet and he messaged he's rejoining. So while he's coming back online, I believe there was a question on how do you balance attaining scale versus survival in a recessionary environment. Look, this totally depends upon what business model do you have. As I was talking about, if your business is still relevant in the crisis today or post the crisis, then you have an opportunity to scale. But first and foremost is finding whether your business is going to survive in the current environment. And if you believe your business is not going to survive, then you will have to repurpose your business model. Great example are, travel companies, right? There is a huge belief that even when the crisis gets over, the travel is not going to bounce back for the next couple of years because people would be skeptical of travel now with the how people are getting used to using the Zoom or other kind of web technologies for having these meetings and conferences. Maybe a lot of corporate travel is going to go down. So it totally depends on the business model. I mean, a company like us, it's a great time for us to scale because logistics is proving to be a very important part of the overall, supply chain and economy. So for us, yes, we would be looking to scale it. Hello.
Hello. Hi, Janardan. So Mahmoud is facing some internet issues. I'll be here to help you answer the rest of the questions. And
we were just talking about certain questions on the Q&A, and I was just helping answer one or two while you were joining. Yeah.
Great, thank you. Okay, so I'll just be looking through the questions. Okay, so there was a question that says, from your perspective, how do you see companies working in plates and can you hear me?
Sorry, your voice is breaking up a little bit.
Okay, can you hear me now better?
Yes.
Okay, so one of the questions said, how do you see the companies working in producing disposable plates and cups and so on for mass producing them for other F&B and F&B companies and restaurants and so on? How do you see them scale post the COVID-19 crisis?
Great question. I think, look, the disposable cutlery industry is now picking up a lot, right? For example, in the UAE, I don't know about the other countries, but I assume it's the same. In UAE, there is a mandate by the government that all the restaurants, even which are open now, they can only operate with, disposable cutlery, right? So suddenly there is a huge demand, spike for that. And, how you scale in the future totally depends upon what kind of product and pricing do you offer to your customers now, right? One is that you want to monetize the opportunity in hand at the moment, versus one, you want to supply to a customer and create that service experience so that a customer sticks with you in the long run, right? In the short run, a lot of times companies might be just compelled to take your product or service because that's the hour of the need. But if you provide them with a realistic pricing, realistic offering, and a good service and a good product quality, then I think it's in the long run. You are establishing a relationship with in the long run, and that's how I would approach it. But clearly, it's one of those sectors which would be in high demand because it won't be suddenly that one day we wake up and everyone will be like, okay, now we can, there is no virus and we are happy. So the psyche, it will take time for people to, overcome the psychological shift which they are going through.
Yeah, especially that everyone is changing their behavior towards everything now. So we have another interesting question from Mwenda. How do I determine my business model? What tools or resources can I use to research on our industry or market to enable us make informed choices to guide our scaling?
Which industry is this?
Okay, so he didn't mention that. If you can please mention real estate. Yeah, real estate.
So look, I think, business model, etc. Frankly, I'm not a real estate expert, so it would be hard for me to say, how to do that. But try figuring out that what a lot of people were doing and what has happened to them, right? Are they able to continue doing the same thing, or is there a shift in the business model, right? Clearly, as we read about what's happening with, for example, Airbnbs or shared economy, these are going to be all, taking a hit in the near term, right? In terms of, real estate of hospitality or retail or sharing, on demand sharing economy. These are all, I think, are not going to be, in demand for a near future. And how a real estate, if you're, let's say you are a broker or you are in the business of developing a real estate and selling, how this will evolve is a very, very tough call, because real estate is one of those investments which people don't do, right away. When the economy is going through recession, everyone kind of likes to, get into the bunker or hunker down and think about, how they can save and defer your spending or investments, right, in the long run. So I think it's very hard to kind of assess. There is no like crystal ball around it to be able to judge, okay, what's going to happen in this sector.
Okay, so we have another question for the agricultural sector. He's asking, how do you scale an integrated agricultural farm in the primary production space chain? It's a bit complicated.
So I think, look, food security is becoming a very important topic, as you know. Given especially when a lot of movement is getting restricted, more and more companies are taking this very seriously about how to become self-dependent or independent in terms of your food supply. So agriculture, and there's a lot of advancements in agriculture. For example, hydroponic farming, vertical farming, and others, right? So if you are operating in one of those areas, I mean, this is a sector which is bound to grow. And when we think about scaling, the idea is more about to do it successfully, what you're doing, one, to show that yes, it works, and then think about certain countries where you can take it maybe forward with, where you have a low cost of operation, right? Clearly, if you take farming to Europe, will have a very different cost structure versus if you take it to some other country in an emerging market, right? So you have to, and plus, it's not only about cost; it's also about the management bandwidth, right? Just because somewhere it's very cheap, you're not going to fly 10 hours to check on one farm, right? So it also depends on the scale of operation you have. You know, especially in Africa, I think it's much easier to go to the next country which you are landlocked with, right? Or the next city, or the few cities. So it's much easier to operate. I think very often people underestimate what it requires as a management bandwidth to control and manage things. And I believe if you have a model working somewhere and you start replicating it in a low cost environment, which is easily accessible and you can manage with the right set of talent which is available to you, then you can scale there.
Interesting. So we have another question, and maybe the last one from Mir Ali. He's asking you, Dubai Expo pushed to next year. Is it an impact or an advantage? Is it a negative impact or advantage to add more economy to the economy?
I don't think it's a negative impact at all. I think everyone is very happy to hear that. I mean, pretty much 2020 is getting renamed as 2021, right? I think if this was to happen in 2020, there would have been a lot of uncertainty. We all would have suffered more because clearly, there would have, who knows how much travel restrictions would have been in place. There would have been a lot of, things which would have been up in the air. So clearly moving into 2021 makes full sense, because we all hope by that time everyone will be back in action, completely. And I see there's a lot of advantage to that. Yes.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much for your time and effort and for your insights on what we've discussed today. Thank you everyone who watched us and tuned in. I'll leave you with a very short video on how to apply to African Netpreneur Prize initiative. It's a very good step for your company if you're looking for scaling, because of the connections that you make, the exposure, the amount of exposure you take out of competition is unmatched. So thank you so much, Janardan, and I'll leave you guys with a very short video on how to apply to ANPI.
Thank you. Thank you, RiseUp. Thank you, ANPI. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
We see you, African entrepreneur, and now the world needs to see you too. Are you ready to be a 2020 ANPI Africa's Business Hero? Are you an African entrepreneur? Is your business at least 3 years old? Are you ready to pitch your business to legends and tell your story? If you said yes to all these questions, it's your turn to apply now. Follow these 5 quick, easy steps to start your journey to becoming an ANPI Business Hero. Step 1, set up an account. Fill in your details. Click register and you are 1 step in. Step 2, read the guidelines carefully. Just visit africabusinessheroes.org and click on application guide. Step 3, the criteria for eligibility. Simple. Each applicant should be a founder or co-founder of the company. The applicant has African citizenship or is a direct descendant of an African citizen. Your company has to be registered, headquartered, and operated in an African country. Your company should be at its post-idea stage. Your business should be 3 years old or more and and has at least 3 years of revenue history. Step 4, get a reference. It could be your mentor, colleague, teacher, or advisor. And finally, step 5, submit your application. Your application includes these 5 sections: founder profile, business deep dive, awards and recognition, and a video introduction. If you get stuck at any point, don't worry. Visit our application guide and frequently asked questions for help, or send an email to info@africabusinessheroes.org. Now, it's your turn to become a 2020 ANPI Business Hero and win a share of $1.5 million, admission into the Alibaba eFounders Fellowship, access to mentorship and training, and a chance to tell your story to Africa and the world. Apply now.
Thank you, everyone. See you next week.